The golden glow of the late afternoon sun poured through the tall windows of an opulent living room, casting soft patterns over the marble floor. There, seated on a pristine leather sofa, was Daniel, a man who had everything that money and luxury could buy. Cars that cost more than some houses, a penthouse with a view that took breaths away, and a company worth millions. Yet, beneath the immaculate surface of his life, there was a void he had never managed to fill. It was a silent ache, a shadow of something lost long before he had become a millionaire. Daniel had grown up in a small neighborhood, one of those places where every face was familiar, and every laughter and argument echoed from house to house like a shared secret. There was a girl who lived just across the street from him. Her name was Clara. For Daniel, she was not just another girl in the neighborhood. She was the soft light of his childhood, the smile that brightened even the darkest corners of his young heart. They were inseparable, like the sun and the moon sharing the same sky, always different yet always together. They played hide and seek until the streetlights came on, walked to school side by side, and shared countless secrets whispered under the old oak tree in her backyard. What Clara never knew was that Daniel's heart had quietly burned for her since the day he first understood what love truly meant. It was not the shallow infatuation of a child, but a deep, enduring feeling that grew with every year. Yet Daniel never spoke a word of it. His fear of losing her friendship outweighed his longing for her love. So he buried his feelings under layers of laughter and silence, watching her blossom into a beautiful young woman while carrying the unspoken truth like a heavy stone in his chest. Just a quick reminder before we continue. If you enjoy meaningful stories with real emotion, consider subscribing to the channel. It truly helps us grow and continue this journey. When they finished school, life began to pull them in different directions. Clara dreamed of studying literature, of telling stories that could touch hearts the way the world had touched hers. Daniel, on the other hand, was consumed by a quiet rage at the poverty that had marked his family for years. He was determined to break free, to rise above it, to never again see his mother struggle to put food on the table. So he left their little street and moved to a nearby city, promising himself that he would return a man who had conquered everything. Years passed, and Daniel made good on his promise. His sharp mind, relentless work ethic, and willingness to take risks turned him into a self-made millionaire. He built a business empire that people admired, envied, and sometimes feared. He could buy anything, luxury cars, elegant suits, even rare pieces of art, but no amount of riches could silence the one voice that still haunted him, the laughter of the girl across the street, the memory of Clara, the love he had never claimed. One quiet morning, as the sun spilled across his immaculate kitchen, Daniel went to check his mail. His life was now full of formal letters, business proposals, and invitations to events filled with the wealthy and powerful. But that morning, a single envelope caught his eye. It was different, beautifully crafted with gold edges and delicate handwriting that seemed oddly familiar. A faint scent of something floral lingered on the paper, a fragrance that stirred an old memory he could not place at first. He carried the envelope to his living room, his heart strangely unsettled. As he tore open the seal, the world seemed to slow around him. His eyes scanned the elegant calligraphy, and when he reached the name of the bride, his breath caught in his throat. Clara. His Clara. The girl who had once been his entire universe was getting married. For a moment, Daniel felt as though someone had struck him. He sat down on the sofa, the letter trembling in his hands. The words blurred as tears welled in his eyes. He could see her smile, hear her voice, and suddenly, every memory came rushing back like a flood he could not stop. He had built his life on strength, discipline, and success, but in that moment he felt utterly powerless. The woman he had loved in silence was about to belong to someone else. But then his eyes fell upon something unexpected, small, almost hidden, written in a hurried hand on the back of the invitation. His heart skipped a beat as he read the words, "I am getting married, but the great love of my life is you." It was Clara's handwriting, unmistakable, raw, and trembling with emotion. Daniel froze, unable to breathe. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind, clashing and colliding. What did this mean? Did she still love him after all these years? Why was she marrying someone else if her heart belonged to him? He could no longer hold back the tears. They slid down his face, warm and relentless, as though each one carried the weight of all the moments he had missed, all the words he had never said. He whispered her name, but the sound of it only deepened his anguish. Clara's message had torn open the wound he had spent years pretending did not exist. Could he really let her go now? Could he watch the only woman he had ever loved walk down the aisle to another man? Daniel's chest heaved as he stood up, the invitation clutched in his trembling hands. He stared at the city skyline outside his window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. The question burned in his soul, relentless and unforgiving. Was it too late? Could he still fight for her, or had he already lost her forever? His heart was racing as though it already knew the answer, but his mind refused to accept it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson, Daniel realized something. This was not just a letter. This was a cry, a whisper from the past, calling him back. And now he would have to decide whether to answer it or let it fade into the silence of regret. That night, Daniel barely slept. The invitation lay on the glass table beside his bed, illuminated by the soft glow of the city lights that streamed through the window. He stared at it as though it were a living thing, as though the words could speak back to him if only he stared long enough. His mind replayed every detail of his past with Clara, the way her laughter used to ring like music through the narrow streets, the way she used to tuck her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the soft tone of her voice when she asked him if he believed in dreams. How many dreams had he abandoned by never telling her that she was his? He rose before dawn, his chest tight with an ache that no amount of success or wealth could erase. He walked barefoot across the cold marble floor of his penthouse, looking around at the evidence of his hard-won life. Sleek Italian furniture, crystal glasses, walls adorned with expensive art. To the world, Daniel was the embodiment of triumph, luxury, riches, and the kind of money that could silence almost any problem. But here, in the dim quiet of his apartment, he felt hollow. What use was all this when the one thing he had ever truly wanted was slipping through his fingers? He made himself a cup of coffee, though he hardly tasted it. His thoughts kept returning to the small note on the back of the invitation. "The great love of my life is you." Those words were not just a confession, they were a storm. Had she written them in a moment of desperation? Was she trying to tell him something, or was it a final farewell, a message carved into the stone of a life that might have been? The more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he truly knew of Clara's world now. He hadn't spoken to her in years. He didn't even know who this man was, the one she was about to marry. He picked up his phone, hesitating as his thumb hovered over her name. It was still there in his contacts, untouched like a relic. His breath caught as he wondered if she would even answer. What would he say? How could he, after all this time, tell her that he had loved her since they were children, that no other woman had ever come close? He set the phone down, overwhelmed. Words were failing him, as they always had when it came to Clara. Memories of their last day together came unbidden. They had been sitting on the steps of her porch, the air heavy with the bittersweet realization that everything was about to change. She had been accepted into a university in another city, and he was already planning his move for work. They had laughed about the future, making promises they both knew they might not keep. But there was one moment, a brief, silent moment, when their eyes had met and something passed between them. He had almost told her then. Almost. But instead, he had smiled and let the moment slip away, just like so many others. Daniel clenched his fists now, frustration boiling inside him. Why had he been so afraid? Why had he let his pride and fear of rejection keep him from the truth? He had built empires, defeated rivals, and stood tall in boardrooms filled with sharks. But when it came to Clara, he had been a coward. And now, someone else was about to claim the life that should have been his. Later that morning, he drove through the city aimlessly, his luxury car cutting through the traffic like a blade. He barely noticed the admiring glances, the way people turned their heads when they saw him. He was lost in thought, drowning in memories of the girl with the soft brown eyes who had once meant everything. He drove past the places where they used to go when they were younger. The old park, the cafe that still stood on the corner, though now it had been renovated and looked almost unrecognizable. Everything had changed, yet his heart remained trapped in the same moment. By noon, Daniel found himself parked in front of his old neighborhood. It had been years since he had last been there, and the sight of it hit him with a force he hadn't expected. The houses were smaller than he remembered, the streets narrower. But there was Clara's house, the same white picket fence, though now a little worn with time. He sat there staring at it, as if the past might come walking out the front door. He closed his eyes and imagined her. What did she look like now? Did she still laugh the same way? Still tilt her head when she was curious? And more importantly, did she still think of him? The note on the back of the invitation seemed to scream yes, but doubt gnawed at him. What if she had written it out of guilt or confusion? What if it meant nothing more than a wistful goodbye? As he sat there, a child's laughter rang out from a nearby yard, snapping him back to reality. He realized he was trembling. All the power he held in the world, all the money, all the luxury, it meant nothing here in this place where his heart still belonged to a single woman. He wanted to get out of the car, knock on her door, and demand to know why she was marrying someone else if her heart was his. But fear paralyzed him. What if it was already too late? The invitation on the passenger seat caught his eye. He picked it up, tracing the letters of her name with his finger, as though they were sacred. It was then that he noticed something else. At the bottom of the note, in the smallest letters, she had scribbled something more. "If you feel the same, you will know where to find me." His pulse quickened. Where to find her? What did that mean? A memory flashed through his mind. The old oak tree, their secret place. Was that it? Was she waiting for him there? The thought was almost unbearable in its intensity. He started the car, his heart pounding with the question that had haunted him since the moment he opened that envelope. Was this his final chance to fight for the love he had buried for so long? The old oak tree stood at the far end of the neighborhood park, its gnarled branches reaching out like the arms of time itself. Daniel hadn't been there in years, but every detail of it was etched into his mind. The rough bark, the hollow at its base where they used to hide their secret notes, the way the light would filter through its leaves, creating a golden canopy that felt like their own private world. As he drove toward the park, his chest tightened with a strange mix of hope and fear. Could Clara really be waiting for him there? Or was this all just the desperate illusion of a man who had let too many years pass in silence? The closer he got, the more memories assaulted him. He could see them both as children, sitting under the shade of that oak tree, sharing dreams of who they wanted to be when they grew up. She had wanted to write books that would make people cry and laugh at the same time. He had wanted to be someone important, someone who could change his family's life. But none of those dreams had included losing each other. Yet here they were, years later, standing on opposite sides of a life they had once imagined together. When Daniel parked his car near the park, he didn't immediately get out. He sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel as if it could anchor him to the reality he feared. He was not the boy who once loved her in silence. He was now a man with a life carved from steel and ambition, a millionaire who had the world at his feet, but whose heart had always been chained to one memory. Would she even recognize him now? Would she still see the boy who used to hold her hand when she cried, or would she only see a stranger wrapped in luxury and success? He finally stepped out, his heart pounding in his chest. The park was almost empty, save for a couple of children playing with a kite and an elderly man feeding pigeons. The oak tree loomed in the distance, just as it always had, unchanged by the years. Daniel walked toward it, each step heavier than the last. He could almost hear the echoes of their laughter in the air, whispers of what once was. When he reached the tree, he paused, his hand resting on its rough trunk. He searched for some sign that she had been there, anything, a note, a flower, a clue, but there was nothing. For a moment, disappointment crashed over him like a wave. Maybe he had misunderstood. Maybe the message on the invitation wasn't meant for him to find her, but simply to tell him what could never be. He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the bark, feeling the sting of regret settle deep in his chest. And then he heard it, a soft voice behind him. "Daniel?" The sound of his name was like lightning striking his heart. He turned, and there she was, Clara. Time seemed to freeze. She stood just a few steps away, wearing a simple white dress that fluttered slightly in the breeze. Her hair, now longer and touched with hints of gold from the sun, framed her face just as beautifully as he remembered. Her eyes, those same deep, soulful eyes, locked on his, and for a moment, neither of them moved. It was as if the years had melted away, and they were once again two kids under the same sky. "Clara," he whispered, his voice hoarse as though her name had been waiting on his lips for years. She smiled, but it was a sad, trembling smile. "I thought you wouldn't come." He swallowed hard, his throat tight. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to." Her gaze softened. "Why do you think I wrote that on the invitation? I didn't know how else to tell you. I didn't know if I'd ever have the courage to face you again." Daniel took a step closer, his heart racing. "Why are you marrying him, Clara? If you still love me, why?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I thought you didn't care. You left, Daniel. You never called, never wrote. I thought I wasn't enough for you. And now—" She paused, looking down at her hands. "Now everything is so complicated." He reached for her hand, but she hesitated. "Clara, you've always been enough. More than enough. I left because I wanted to become someone who could give you the world, who could give you everything you deserved. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." Her lips trembled as she looked up at him. "I waited for you. For years I waited. But I thought maybe I was just a memory to you, and now I don't know what to do. The wedding is in 2 days." 2 days. The word struck him like a blade. "Then let me fight for you," he said, his voice raw and desperate. "Let me prove that we were never meant to be apart. Tell me, Clara, do you love him?" She shook her head slowly, a tear escaping down her cheek. "He's kind, he's good to me, but he's not you." The weight of her words hit him with such force that he felt breathless. He cupped her face in his hands, wiping away the tear. "Then come with me. Right now. Leave all of this behind. We can still have the life we dreamed of." But Clara stepped back slightly, her gaze torn. "It's not that simple. I've built a life here. There are people depending on me, and I can't just run." Daniel felt the urgency rise in him like a fire. "Then tell me what I need to do. Tell me how to show you that nothing, no amount of time, no distance, no mistakes, can erase what we have." Clara looked at him for a long moment, her silence heavy with unspoken words. Finally she said, "Meet me tomorrow night, at the pier. If I'm there, you'll have your answer. If I'm not, then you'll know I chose another path." And with that she turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing beneath the oak tree, his heart pounding with a mix of hope, fear, and a love that felt stronger than ever. But as he watched her go, a shadow of doubt crept in. Would she come? Or had he already lost the battle before it even began? The following morning, Daniel woke with an unshakable tension in his chest, as if the weight of years unspoken had settled on his heart overnight. He could no longer ignore the storm brewing inside him. Clara's note was not just a passing message. It was a cry that seemed to cut through time, reaching the boy he once was. He needed to face her, to hear from her lips what her heart had never said. The thought both terrified and electrified him. As he prepared for the day, he looked around his luxurious penthouse. It was a space filled with perfection: polished marble floors, velvet armchairs, walls adorned with art worth more than some people's lifetime earnings. Yet everything felt hollow. None of it mattered without her. The world saw him as a man who had conquered everything, a millionaire CEO with confidence and charm. But in the mirror he saw something else. A man who had all the money and luxury one could dream of, yet felt poorer than ever in the absence of true love. He picked up the invitation again, the words burning his eyes. The name of the groom, Michael, stirred emotions he hadn't felt in years. A strange mix of jealousy, fear, and regret gripped him. What did Michael have that he didn't? He might have been there for her while Daniel was building his empire. He might have been brave enough to tell her what Daniel couldn't, and now he was about to claim the one thing Daniel had always wanted but had been too afraid to fight for. In an impulsive moment, Daniel decided to drive out to the countryside estate where the wedding would be held. He wanted to see it for himself, to feel the reality of what was about to happen. As he drove his sleek black car along winding roads, memories of his last conversation with Clara before leaving their hometown flooded his mind. It had been a simple goodbye, filled with promises to keep in touch. She had hugged him and said, "Don't forget me when you're rich and famous." He had smiled, but deep down he wanted to say, "How could I ever forget you? You're the only reason I breathe." When Daniel arrived at the estate, he parked at a distance, careful not to draw attention. The venue was breathtaking, lush gardens surrounded by tall trees, a stone pathway leading to a charming chapel that stood like something out of a dream. He could almost see her walking there, wearing white, her smile radiating under the sunlight. The thought pierced him like a knife. Could he really stand by and watch her marry another man? As he stood there leaning against his car, he imagined scenarios. What if he showed up on the wedding day, uninvited, and told her the truth? Would she stop everything for him? Or would she look at him with pity and say, "You're too late, Daniel"? The uncertainty was unbearable. He clenched his fists, his heart pounding with the weight of choices that could not be undone. On his way back to the city, Daniel made a detour to their old neighborhood once again. He parked in front of Clara's childhood home, which now looked slightly worn, with ivy creeping along the fence. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring. It was as if the house held all their secrets, all the laughter and whispered dreams they had once shared. He wanted to knock on the door to see her face, to tell her everything, but fear stopped him again. What if she told him she had moved on, that her note was just a nostalgic gesture, nothing more? As he sat there, lost in thought, a sudden movement caught his eye. The door opened, and Clara stepped outside. She looked just as radiant as he remembered, her hair catching the sunlight, her smile gentle yet distant, as if carrying the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. Daniel froze. He wanted to call her name, but his voice caught in his throat. She was speaking to someone on the phone, her expression a mix of happiness and hesitation. Then, for a fleeting second, her gaze turned in his direction. Their eyes met across the distance, and Daniel's world stopped. In that moment, it was as if time folded in on itself. The years apart, the silence, the unspoken love, all of it existed in that one glance. Her lips parted slightly, as though she was about to say something. But then she looked away, her phone conversation pulling her attention back. Daniel's hands trembled on the steering wheel. Should he step out and speak to her? Or would that ruin everything? The silence between them felt louder than any words could be. He started the car, his heart pounding, but he didn't drive away. He sat there, torn between desire and fear. Every second felt like an eternity, as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to act. But before he could make a move, Clara's car pulled up, and she got in, driving off without looking back. Daniel followed her from a distance, unsure of what he was doing, only knowing that he couldn't let her slip away again. She stopped at a small cafe, one they used to go to as teenagers. He watched from across the street, the memories hitting him like waves. How many times had they sat there sharing dreams, never realizing those moments would one day become the most precious memories of his life? As Clara entered the cafe, Daniel's mind raced. He could walk in and tell her everything. How she had always been the love of his life. How he had built everything not just for success but for the chance to one day deserve her. But fear gripped him once again. What if she didn't feel the same anymore? What if she was marrying Michael not out of obligation, but out of real love? The cafe door closed behind her, and Daniel sat frozen, watching through the window as she ordered a coffee. The sight of her was both comforting and tormenting. He realized then that he was at a breaking point. He could no longer live with the regret of silence. Something had to happen, and soon. But just as he gathered the courage to step out of the car, something unexpected occurred. A man walked into the cafe, Michael. Daniel recognized him from the photos he had found during his search. Michael was tall, confident, and well-dressed, the kind of man who seemed to fit naturally into Clara's world. They greeted each other with a warm embrace, and Daniel's heart sank. He felt like an intruder watching a life that should have been his. Yet, as he observed them, something peculiar happened. Clara's smile seemed forced. Her laughter, though polite, lacked the warmth Daniel remembered. And then, for a brief moment, she looked out the window, her eyes distant, as if searching for something or someone. Daniel's breath caught. Was she looking for him? Did she feel his presence, even without seeing him? The unanswered questions grew heavier, pressing down on his chest. He knew he couldn't just leave things as they were. But how could he step into her life now, after all these years of silence? The moment he had avoided for so long was coming closer, whether he was ready or not. Daniel sat in his car for what felt like an eternity, his eyes fixed on the cafe window where Clara and Michael sat together. Every passing second was a reminder of the years he had wasted, of all the moments when he should have spoken but chose silence instead. He could see Michael reaching for Clara's hand across the table, but something about the way she responded told Daniel that her heart wasn't fully there. She smiled, yes, but it wasn't the kind of smile he remembered, the one that lit up her whole face, the one she used to give him when they were just kids under the oak tree. It was a smile filled with duty, with something forced, as if she was playing a role she didn't believe in. His mind raced, trying to understand the situation. What kind of man was Michael? Was he the type of man who loved Clara with everything he had, or was he simply convenient, a man who came into her life when Daniel wasn't there? Daniel's jaw tightened at the thought. He wasn't about to lose her without knowing the truth. For years he had lived with the regret of his silence, but now he could not let that silence rob him of the chance to fight for her. Clara looked out the window again, and this time Daniel was sure she was looking at something beyond the cafe walls. It was as if she felt him, as if his presence was stirring something deep within her. He swallowed hard, his hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He could walk in there right now, tell her everything, confess that he had never stopped loving her. But the fear of being too late still gnawed at him. When Clara and Michael finally left the cafe, Daniel stayed in his car, watching as they walked together down the street. Their steps were in sync, but Clara's posture told a different story. She wasn't leaning into Michael. She wasn't glowing with the joy of a woman about to marry the love of her life. Instead, there was a weight in her shoulders, a heaviness that Daniel could recognize even from afar. She was torn. He could feel it. That evening, Daniel couldn't shake the image of her from his mind. He paced around his penthouse, the invitation lying open on his desk, like a challenge he couldn't ignore. 2 days, he whispered to himself. In just 2 days, she would be walking down that aisle. And if he didn't act, he would lose her forever. The thought of it made his chest ache with a pain sharper than any failure he had ever known. Finally, he made a decision. He called an old friend from the neighborhood, someone who still had close ties to Clara's family. "Tell me everything," Daniel said, his voice low but firm. "How did she meet him? What does she feel for him? I need to know." The friend hesitated, surprised by Daniel's sudden urgency, but eventually spoke. What he learned only confirmed what he already suspected. Michael had come into Clara's life at a time when she felt alone, when her dreams of being a writer had been shattered by rejection and hardship. He had been kind to her, supportive even, but there was never the spark, the fire that she once had in her eyes. "She's not happy, Daniel," the friend said softly. "She's settling." The word hit Daniel like a blow. Clara was too extraordinary to settle. She deserved love that burned like the sun, the kind of love that made you want to fight for every breath, every heartbeat. He couldn't let her walk into a life that wasn't meant for her, not when he knew, deep in his soul, that they were meant to be. The next day, Daniel decided to see her. He drove to her family's house, his hands sweating as he gripped the steering wheel. His heart raced as he parked across the street, watching the front door as if it held the answers to every question he had. And then, as if summoned by his thoughts, Clara stepped outside. She wore a soft blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and for a moment Daniel forgot how to breathe. She was still the girl he remembered, yet even more beautiful, more graceful, like time had only deepened the magic of who she was. Before he could think twice, he stepped out of the car. Clara froze when she saw him, her eyes widening. For a long moment they just stared at each other, the world around them fading into silence. "Daniel?" she whispered, almost as if she didn't believe he was real. "Clara," he said, his voice shaking. "We need to talk." She glanced around nervously as though afraid someone might see them. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see you," he said, taking a slow step closer. "I had to know if you meant what you wrote on that invitation." Her breath caught. "You saw it?" "I saw it," he said, his gaze locking with hers. "And I can't stop thinking about it. Clara, do you still love me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head as if trying to push them back. "Daniel, it's not that simple. I wrote that because I needed you to know the truth before it was too late. But my life is different now. Things are complicated." "Complicated?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. "Clara, I don't care about complicated. I care about you. If you still love me, then nothing else matters. Tell me I'm not too late." Clara hesitated, her lips trembling. "I don't know what to do," she said softly. "I can't hurt people who care about me. But Daniel, I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." The words hit him like a wave, both painful and exhilarating. "Then let me fight for you," he said, his voice low but fierce. "Don't walk into that marriage if your heart belongs to me. Please, Clara, tell me you'll meet me tomorrow. Tell me you'll give us a chance." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression a storm of emotions. Finally, she nodded. "Tomorrow," she said quietly. "At the pier. If I come, you'll know." As she walked back toward the house, Daniel felt both hope and fear gnawing at him. Tomorrow could change everything, or it could destroy him completely. "And now I want to hear from you. If you were in Daniel's place, would you fight for love no matter what? Tell me in the comments what your heart says." The following day felt like the longest of Daniel's life. Every minute dragged as he tried to keep himself busy, but nothing could quiet the storm inside him. He had been through hostile business takeovers, boardroom battles, and moments where millions of dollars were on the line. Yet none of that had ever made his hands tremble the way they did now. Because this wasn't about money or luxury. This was about love, raw, unfiltered, and terrifying. By late afternoon, Daniel found himself standing by the window of his penthouse, staring out at the sprawling city below. The sun was starting its descent, casting the skyscrapers in warm hues of gold and red. He thought about all the choices he had made to get to this point. Every decision, every sacrifice had brought him success, but at what cost? He had built an empire, but in building it, he had lost the chance to tell the one woman he truly loved how much she meant to him. And now time was running out. He looked down at the invitation again. The gold lettering glimmered in the fading sunlight, and the note on the back, "The great love of my life is you," felt like a plea, a message written not with ink but with her heart. He knew that tonight, when the clock struck the appointed hour, he would find out if her words were a promise or a farewell. By the time he reached the pier, the sky had turned a deep shade of twilight, with the last traces of daylight melting into the horizon. The water shimmered under the dim light, reflecting the city lights like scattered diamonds. Daniel's heart pounded as he walked along the wooden planks, his eyes scanning every corner for her silhouette. Would she come? Or would he be left alone with nothing but the sound of the waves and the echo of what could have been? He stood there for what felt like an eternity, hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the cool evening air. Every sound made him turn his head, a car passing in the distance, footsteps on the street nearby, the creak of the pier beneath his feet. But Clara wasn't there. He checked his watch. 10 minutes past the time. Then 20. Doubt began to settle in like an unwelcome shadow. Maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe she had decided that a future with Michael, even without passion, was safer than risking everything with him. But just when Daniel felt the weight of despair crushing him, he heard the faint sound of footsteps. He turned, and there she was. Clara walked toward him slowly, her dress fluttering in the breeze, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the pier lights. She looked nervous, her hands clutching the folds of her dress, but when their eyes met, something in both of them seemed to settle. It was as if the years apart, the silence, the unspoken feelings, all of it disappeared, leaving only the truth of what they had always felt. "You came," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. "I almost didn't," Clara admitted, her voice trembling. "But I couldn't stay away." He took a step closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Why are you marrying him, Clara? If you love me, if you still love me, why go through with it?" She looked down, her shoulders shaking slightly. "Because I didn't think you wanted me anymore. You left, Daniel. You built this incredible life, and I thought I was just part of your past." "You've never been my past," he said fiercely. "Clara, every single thing I've done, every success, every sleepless night, it all comes back to you. I wanted to be a man who was worthy of you, but I was wrong to think that money and success could replace what I should have told you all along. I love you. I always have." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know how many nights I wished you would come back? How many times I told myself that if you really loved me, you'd find a way to say it. And then when Michael asked me to marry him, I said yes because I was tired of waiting. But it was never him, Daniel. It was always you." Daniel reached out, taking her hands in his. "Then don't do it. Don't marry him. Come with me. We don't have to have all the answers tonight. We just need to start." She hesitated, her gaze searching his face for something. Certainty, maybe, or courage. What if it's too late? What if I ruin everything? "It's never too late to choose love," he said softly. "We've already lost so much time. Let's not lose any more." For a moment, the only sound between them was the gentle lapping of the water against the pier. Clara looked at him, her heart pounding. And then, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, she whispered, "Okay." Relief and joy surged through Daniel like a flood. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he would never let go again. The world around them faded. In that embrace, there were no regrets, no what-ifs, only the certainty that they were finally where they were meant to be. But as they stood there holding each other, Daniel knew that this was just the beginning. There would be questions, challenges, people they would have to face. And Michael. Michael wouldn't just walk away quietly. Still, for the first time in years, Daniel felt at peace, because no matter what came next, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would never let Clara go again. The next day was a storm inside Daniel's chest. Every hour felt like a test of endurance, every minute an endless battle between hope and fear. He sat in his office, surrounded by the symbols of his success: glossy tables, golden awards, contracts worth millions, yet his mind was miles away. What was Clara doing right now? Was she trying on her wedding dress, letting herself be carried by the tide of expectations? Or was she thinking about him, about the way his hands had held hers on that pier, the way his voice had trembled when he told her he had never stopped loving her? The world outside his window seemed cruelly indifferent to his turmoil. The city thrived. Cars moved through the streets like streams of light, and people rushed to their destinations, unaware of the storm brewing in one man's heart. Daniel tried to work, tried to drown himself in tasks and meetings, but even his assistants noticed he wasn't himself. "Is everything all right, sir?" one of them asked. He simply nodded, forcing a thin smile. How could he explain that no success, no luxury, no amount of money could fix the one thing that truly mattered? By afternoon, his anxiety reached a breaking point. He couldn't wait any longer. He decided to drive back to the old neighborhood, hoping to see her, hoping to find some kind of sign. As he drove, memories of Clara invaded him once again, memories so vivid they almost hurt. He remembered the summer afternoons when they would sit under the oak tree eating ice cream, the times she had encouraged him when he felt like a failure, the way she had always believed in his dreams even before he believed in himself. When he arrived, he saw Clara's house bustling with activity. There were cars parked outside, people carrying flowers and decorations through the front door. His heart sank as he realized how close the wedding truly was. It wasn't just a threat anymore, it was real. It was happening, unless Clara decided otherwise. Daniel parked his car far enough not to draw attention. He sat there watching the house, every detail burning into his mind. A man came out, a tall, well-dressed man with an easy smile and confident steps. Daniel clenched his fists. Was this the fiancé? Was this the man who would take Clara's hand if Daniel didn't act? Something in Daniel's chest ignited, a mix of fear and determination. He couldn't lose her without trying everything. The man walked to his car and drove away, leaving the house quieter. Daniel wanted to go to the door, to knock, to demand to see Clara, but he hesitated. What if she was surrounded by family? What if she wasn't ready to face him yet? The thought of putting her in a difficult position stopped him. He couldn't hurt her like that, not when he loved her enough to let her choose freely. Instead, he took out the invitation again, reading her note on the back. I am getting married, but the great love of my life is you. He whispered the words like a prayer, as if saying them out loud might summon her to him. Night fell, and Daniel returned to the pier, unable to stay away from the place where their hearts had finally spoken the truth. He sat on the bench facing the water, lost in thought, until he heard footsteps approaching. His heart leapt, hoping it was Clara, but it wasn't. It was a young woman, probably a teenager, holding a bouquet of flowers. She stopped near him, hesitating, then asked, "Are you Daniel?" He frowned, taken aback. "Yes, I am. Why?" "She told me to give you this." The girl handed him the bouquet and a folded note before walking away without another word. Daniel's hands shook as he opened the note. It was Clara's handwriting. "Meet me tomorrow morning at the place where everything began. If you want me to choose you, be there. Don't be late." His breath caught as he realized what she meant. The oak tree. The rest of the night was sleepless again. He walked through his penthouse like a restless ghost, the note clutched in his hand. What would he say to her? How could he convince her that their love was worth risking everything for? Would she even show up? Doubt whispered cruelly in his ear, but his heart clung to hope like a lifeline. When dawn finally arrived, Daniel was already dressed, wearing the suit he knew she had once loved, a dark, classic cut with just enough sharpness to reflect who he had become. He drove through the empty streets, his pulse pounding in rhythm with every mile that brought him closer to Clara. The oak tree stood tall as ever, its leaves swaying gently in the morning breeze. He arrived early, just as the first rays of sunlight touched its branches. He waited, his heart pounding, every second feeling heavier than the last. He kept thinking of all the words he had never said, of how this moment could change everything or end it forever. And then, in the distance, he saw her. Clara walked slowly toward him, dressed in a simple pale blue dress, her hair falling in waves over her shoulders. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to disappear. There was no wedding, no fear, no past, only the two of them standing where it had all begun. "Clara," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled faintly, though her eyes were glistening. "I didn't sleep all night," she admitted. "Neither did I," he replied. "I couldn't stop thinking about you, about us." Clara stepped closer, the sunlight framing her like something almost unreal. "Daniel, I'm terrified. But when I see you, when I hear your voice, I know this isn't over." It never was. He took her hand gently, holding it like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Then let's not let fear win this time. Come with me. We can leave everything behind and start over." Clara hesitated, her eyes searching his. "If I do this, there's no going back." "Then don't look back," he said, his voice steady but filled with longing. "Look at me. I'm here. I've always been here, even when I was miles away." She closed her eyes, and for a moment it felt like the universe was holding its breath, waiting for her answer. Would she choose him? Or would she let the life she had built pull her away forever? The morning sunlight danced on the leaves of the old oak tree, casting a golden glow around them as they stood in silence. Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he held Clara's. And in that fragile moment, both of them felt the weight of years unspoken. His heart was pounding, not out of fear this time, but because he finally knew that no amount of riches, money, or luxury could ever mean as much as the woman standing before him. Everything he had built, every success he had achieved, suddenly felt small compared to this. "Clara," he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. "We've wasted so much time. I don't want to lose another moment without you." She looked up at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I don't either," she said softly. "But this is bigger than us, Daniel. I've made promises, and people are expecting me to walk down that aisle. What if I hurt everyone because I'm choosing my heart?" Daniel gently cupped her face in his hands. "Sometimes, following your heart is the only way to truly live. I built a life full of success, but without love, it meant nothing. We can't live for the expectations of others when our souls know the truth." Her breath caught as she searched his face, as if looking for something that would give her courage. "Do you really think we could start over after everything?" "I don't think," Daniel said, his voice steady and firm. "I know. We were meant for this. You were never meant to be just a memory, Clara." The silence that followed was filled with unspoken longing, but also with hope. It was as though the old oak tree, witness to their childhood dreams, was giving them its silent blessing. Yet, even as the moment felt almost perfect, Clara's eyes turned distant. "Daniel," she said softly, "I wish I had your certainty. I wish I believed I deserved this happiness." He took her hands again and pressed them against his chest, over his heart. "You deserve everything good in this world, and I swear, if you choose me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you." The words hung between them, raw and real. Clara let out a shaky breath, and for the first time in years she smiled. A smile that wasn't forced, that wasn't hidden. It was the same smile Daniel had fallen in love with all those years ago. And then, a silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of understanding, of two souls recognizing that something much greater was at work here. Daniel suddenly remembered something his mother used to tell him when he was young, during the hardest times of their lives. True love is a gift from God. It doesn't fade with time, and no amount of hardship can take it away if you hold on to it with faith. Those words, once forgotten, now rang in his heart like a quiet melody. He looked at Clara with new clarity. "Do you remember when we used to talk about dreams under this tree? I think we were children, but we understood something adults often forget. Love is more powerful than fear, and it is not an accident that we're here now, in this moment." Her lips parted slightly as though to answer, but she stayed silent. Daniel continued, his voice lowering almost like a prayer. "Maybe we tried to write our own stories, Clara, but God has always had his hand in this. He's the one who created the kind of love that doesn't die, even when years pass. I believe he's giving us a second chance." Clara blinked as if his words were peeling away the fear she had been carrying. "Do you really believe that?" she asked softly. "Yes," Daniel said, "because real love is never an accident. It's a reflection of the love God shows us, unending, patient, and stronger than all the pain in this world." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above them, and Clara felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in weeks, the noise of expectations, the pressure of the wedding, and the fear of what people would say all seemed to fade. She whispered, "Then maybe this is where I'm meant to be." Daniel smiled, his thumb brushing away a tear from her cheek. "You are." There was a long pause, and then Clara spoke again, her voice trembling. "You know, when I wrote that note on the invitation, I wasn't sure if you'd even see it. But something in my heart told me that if you truly loved me, you'd find me. And here you are." He kissed her forehead gently, holding her as though the world could fall apart and it wouldn't matter. "Clara, I will fight for you until my last breath. But I don't think I need to fight. I think I just need to love you the way I should have all along." And in that moment, it was as if everything became clear, not just for Daniel and Clara, but for anyone who has ever been afraid of love. Because the truth is, Love is not meant to be perfect or easy. It is meant to be real, to be fought for, and to be cherished. A biblical reflection. In life, there are moments when we realize that all our achievements and possessions mean nothing if we don't have love. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 13:2, "If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing." True love is a gift that reflects God's own heart, a love that never gives up, never fades, and never fails. Daniel and Clara's story is a reminder that sometimes God allows us to face pain and distance not to break us, but to teach us what truly matters. As it is written in 1 John 4:18, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love." And in Ecclesiastes 3:1 we are told, "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven." For Daniel and Clara, their time had finally come, a time to stop running from their hearts and to embrace the love that had been there all along. The sun was setting when Daniel and Clara finally walked away from the oak tree, hand in hand. The golden light cast a warm glow over them, as if nature itself was celebrating their decision. For years they had been trapped by silence and fear, but now there was only clarity and the undeniable truth of their hearts. Clara's steps were lighter, her breath steady, and Daniel felt a weight lifting from his soul. It was as if every sleepless night, every regret, every unspoken word had finally been redeemed in this single day. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," Clara whispered as they reached the path leading out of the park. "But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid." Daniel smiled, his eyes soft as he looked at her. "Tomorrow doesn't scare me anymore either, not when I know we're facing it together." The days that followed weren't simple. Clara had to face the painful task of calling off her wedding. It wasn't an easy conversation. Tears were shed and there were moments when she almost faltered. But deep down she knew that staying in a life without real love would be far crueler than walking away now. Michael was hurt, but he was also kind enough to understand that hearts cannot be forced. He wished her happiness, though it was clear the wound would take time to heal. Daniel stood by Clara's side through it all. He didn't try to push her or control her decisions. Instead, he simply reminded her day after day of how deeply she was loved and valued. He realized that true love wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about being present, about giving someone the courage to choose what's right for their soul. 1 week later, they returned to the oak tree together. This time, it wasn't a meeting of uncertainty, but a celebration of what they had reclaimed. Daniel brought a small wooden box, placing it at the base of the tree. Inside was a single letter he had written to Clara, a letter where he poured out every emotion, every regret, and every promise for the future. Clara, with tears in her eyes, placed her own letter beside his, a letter she had written years ago, but never had the courage to send. "We're writing a new story now," Daniel said, his voice steady. "One that's honest, one that starts here with no more secrets." Clara nodded, her heart full. "I never stopped believing in us, Daniel. I just thought maybe life had other plans, but maybe this was God's plan all along." He kissed her forehead, his hand brushing gently through her hair. Maybe it was. From that moment on, their lives began to intertwine in ways they had both dreamed of, but never dared to hope for. Daniel, who once believed that success was measured by money and luxury, now saw life through a different lens. The true wealth he had been seeking wasn't in his bank accounts or his business. It was in every smile, every conversation, every quiet moment spent with the woman he loved. Clara, too, found her heart renewed. With Daniel's encouragement, she started writing again, pouring her emotions into stories that touched the soul. And each night, as they sat together watching the city lights, they felt an unshakable gratitude for the second chance they had been given. But the story didn't end there. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale. They still faced challenges, work demands, old wounds, and moments of doubt. Yet each time, they returned to the truth that had brought them back together. Love is not about perfection, but about commitment, about choosing each other even when it's hard. One evening, Clara asked Daniel Do you ever regret not telling me how you felt when we were younger? Daniel thought for a moment before answering. Sometimes, but maybe we needed all that time apart to understand just how much we mean to each other. If I'd told you back then, we might not be who we are now. She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. Then I guess the wait was worth it. And as the days turned into months, Daniel and Clara learned that happiness wasn't found in a single grand moment, but in the quiet, ordinary ones. A shared laugh over breakfast, a late-night walk under the stars, a simple touch that said, "I'm here. I'm not leaving." Daniel and Clara's journey is a reminder that love often requires patience, courage, and faith. It's a story of two souls who refuse to let fear define their future. And maybe, just maybe, their story is a reflection of something you need to hear today, that it's never too late to fight for what truly matters. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us for more. There are other stories waiting to inspire you. Stories that remind us all of the power of love, hope, and second chances. Click to watch the next video on the screen, subscribe to the channel, and let's continue this journey together.